Two worlds, one party. Let's talk about why these protagonists in Xenoblade Chronicles 3 are smarter and more amazing than you may think. Hello everybody, it's your boy Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming here today. Let's talk the heroes of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I've talked about the villains and why I think the antagonists for this game are generally really good and add to the overall story, so let's pivot our discussion, pivot our focus, if you will, onto the primary cast of characters. We have Noah, Mio, Lance, Senna, Uni, and Tyon. Now, why do they work so well? Because on the surface, you may think, well, yeah, they're just kind of like, standard Xenoblade protagonists, right? What's so special about them? Well, let me tell you. The way they're able to weave the story and the theme and the message of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 into the protagonists, both story-wise, development-wise, and gameplay-wise, is honestly pretty impressive in my opinion. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's just start off with establishing the groundwork. The interlinked pairings. In combat, two protagonists, one from Kevis, one from Magnus, can do a DBZ fusion to turn into a giant freaking mech. It's awesome, but it's also a little bit more important than just turning into a freaking mech. Now I know, how could anything be more important than that? Let's talk about how it weaves into the theme. Because we have three, count them, three, not one, not two, most certainly not four. We got three pairings. We have Noah and Mio, Lance and Senna, and Uni and Tyon. Those are the three main pairings. Noah and Mio turn into one mech, Lance and Senna turn into another mech, Uni and Tyon turn into another one. And, well, they technically can turn into two each, like one for each, but you get the point. There's three pairs. But to really explain why those pairings work so well, we have to talk about each individual character's backstory. Because their backstory ties into this central theme of moving on from the perpetual now, this endless present, into an uncertain future. Noah, his whole story, really, is challenging these established norms and learning from the past. Not being afraid of what's to come, being willing to step into the future, learning from N. Mia, what's her deal? Well, for a large part of the early game, all the way up until like Chapter 5, and even then into Chapter 5, what Mia's story really contends with is dealing with a finite existence and being on the cusp of death and demise. How do you make your finite time meaningful? She only has like a month or two left at the beginning of the game. She doesn't have that long. How can she take up this mantle of Ouroboros and really stamp out her place in the world? She doesn't have much time left. How do you make your life meaningful? She's afraid of the future. Now with Tyon's a little bit different. Tyon is learning from the past, learning from the mistakes of his past, being willing to accept them and move on from them. Because he suffered loss, he suffered sadness, but he has to be willing to augment his strategies moving into the future so that he can become a better person and a better strategist. So the mistakes that he made in the past don't happen again. But that he can also be willing to forgive himself for what happened. Uni, her whole deal is not being afraid of who or what we are, and who and what we were, and be willing to step into the future with your chin up. She saw her previous iteration die by Mobius when her colony became gold rank. That scared her to her core, it shook her to her very foundation. She has to be willing to accept that, hey, the past can be scary. Hey, we may not know everything about the past or about our past selves, but we have to be willing to accept that and move into the future. You can't use it as an excuse. Lance is a little bit different. With Lance, his whole story comes about with knowing your own limitations and being able to stamp out your own place and make a better future, regardless, even if your limitations themselves can lead or led in the past to sadness and loss, like how he lost Yuren because Yuren had to sacrifice himself to save Lance, because Lance, and at least in his mind throughout large portions of the game, wasn't strong enough, wasn't capable of saving those he really cared about. He has to be willing to accept that. It's okay to try and get better, to try and better yourself, but you have to be willing to accept the past for what it is, and not be afraid of moving into the future. You can't use it as an excuse. With Senna, she's all about finding her own identity and learning not to judge yourself based on others' success, and that you cannot be willing to just give in to this perpetual now. Be scared of the future because you are afraid you're not going to be able to hold up compared to everybody else. You're afraid of your own inadequacies. You have to be willing to step into the future despite all of that. Now, what I said, a lot of the times for a lot of those characters, it probably sounds quite familiar to one another, right? It sounds like there's only little pivots and divots between each character's overall story, and that's by design, because they all share the same theme of accepting your past and being willing to get over it, accept it, and move into the future. But not only do each character tell a specific lesson under that umbrella theme of the game, but each interlink pair, like I talked about before, those relate to each other in some capacity. How do Noah and Mio relate to each other more than the others? Well, they're both more existential about their own crises, but not being beholden to the established rules of the world and not using it as an excuse to not do good and to not take the right path. What about Tyon and Uni? Well, they're all about learning from the past while not being beholden or scared of it. Being able to better yourself, accept the difficulties you experienced before, experience all the pain, that sadness, and be willing to move on from it. And be willing to step into the future, to learn from it. What about Lance and Senna? Well, they're all about trying to find their own place in the world. Lance is always concerned about not being strong enough to safeguard those he cares about. Senna is worried about her not being as good as everybody else, and not being able to safeguard the one she cares about, or the world, or being able to have her own place. Both Lance and Senna have to find their own place in the world and not constantly put themselves down by comparing themselves to others. They have to be able to accept and learn to accept that they are their own people. They are their own person. The main characters of Xenoblade 3 aren't just a bunch of characters that serve as vehicles for you to experience the story, because they are the story. They are those themes, the lessons. The game is trying to teach you, though they are those themes incarnate. And they act as different perspectives on its central idea of moving on from the perpetual now into the future. And even through the gameplay, where they're able to merge together these foreign entities from opposing worlds that aren't meant to be together at this point in time. They're able to fuse together, put aside their differences, learn from the past, and strive to do better for the future through Ouroboros, through those interlinks. It may not last forever, but every time it ends, you have to be willing to move on from it, and then be willing to do what's right again, go interlink again. They start the game, all these characters, at the very beginnings of the game, they are stuck in the respective factions of Kevers and Agnes. They are stuck in the perpetual now, in the current world. And they all grow and develop. They don't feel like one amorphous group. They are individual characters with their own traumas and desires, and they both grow individually, as well as a group, to face the challenges that are posed to them by the world and by Mobius. Both their stories, their development through the game, their emotions, and their gameplay intertwine with each other and contribute to that overall theme that was said even in the Ask the Developer interview of these foreign things becoming one. They become one, they become Ouroboros to take the world back from the fear of tomorrow, made manifest as Mobius. And at the end of it all, they're willing to sacrifice their own happiness to preserve the uncertainty of the future, because they can't promise themselves that they'll be able to save everybody. They can't promise themselves that they're able to find happiness in the future. But what they all learned is that they cannot be beholden to the past, and they cannot be scared of stepping into the future and just staying in the present. They had to learn the hard way, through both their individual stories and as a group, that they have to be willing to move into the future, regardless of what that future may hold. They aren't just a camera to show the story, because they are the story. And that's how, in my opinion, you can get some really memorable, really meaningful protagonists for your game, especially a long-form RPG like Xenoblade Chronicles 3, is when you're able to make those characters feel like actual characters. They have their own wants, desires, their own fears and trepidations, and they have their own trauma, their own sorrows, their own joy, what makes them happy. They have their own individual identities, and they're able to morph and develop over the course of the game and over the course of the experiences that they happen upon, that they feel with one another, that turn them into different characters by the end of the game. The more developed, the more emotionally sound they have learned through the past, through the events of the game, the main theme of the story. And that is a character-driven story done correctly, in my opinion. That is how you do it. When these characters don't just feel like they're there so that we have a way to view the story, these characters feel like they are there to tell the story, to be a part of the story. And that, to me, is why they are so well written, and why these characters work so well. Do I have my problems with some of them? Sure, I think I would have liked to have seen some more development for Lance and Senna, some more time in the sun for those characters specifically. I thought Taya and Uni had really good time in the sun, as well as Noah and Mio. I just kind of wish we had a little bit more with Lance and Senna, but still, their story is sound. I just kind of want a little bit more of it. I'll talk about that in a future video. But for right now, that's why I really like the protagonists of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. That is why I like Ouroboros, this party, so much. So thank you all for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below with your favorite Ouroboros pair. Do you like Noah and Mio? Do you like Tyon and Uni? Or do you like Lance and Senna? Let me know. Personally, I think Noah and Mio are probably my favorite pairing, mainly because of the development we got at the end of Chapter 5 and the beginning of Chapter 6. But let me know in the comments down below what your favorite pairing was and why. I'd love to hear your perspective and hear your thoughts on it. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe out there, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.